At a family estate auction, my stepmother whispered loudly, "Maybe next life she'll be born a leader." Everyone smirked. I waited 2 decades. Then I quietly dismantled the entire estate, leaving generations scrambling. Their art collections were seized by banks, heirlooms auctioned anonymously, and no physical proof remains that their family ever lived at the estate. Future genealogists list the family as extinct due to financial collapse. My name's Tara. I'm 42 now. But this starts when I was 22, standing in the front room of my childhood home in Hickory, North Carolina, the day of my father's estate auction. He'd died suddenly, massive heart problem. I was living in Asheville at the time, finishing up community college, scraping by working 2 jobs. I wasn't ready. Not for any of it. One day he was calling me to ask how my accounting class was going. 2 days later, a sheriff's deputy was handing me his wallet and car keys in a plastic bag. Lorraine, my stepmother, made the arrangements. She always did. She'd married my father when I was 8, 2 years after my mom died from cancer. Lorraine had money, connections, and a constant fake smile. She liked control more than anything else. And she hated that I reminded everyone of my mother. Even when I was a kid, she'd tell me not to speak unless spoken to, when guests came over. Once, when I was 12, I heard her tell her sister that I looked just like that moody woman Robert used to be married to. I remember standing behind the hallway wall, pressing my hands into the wallpaper just so I wouldn't cry. Fast forward to the auction. The old house looked the same: stuffy floral wallpaper, polished wood floors, and the big staircase that used to terrify me as a kid. Except now it was full of strangers. Lorraine had hired a fast-talking auctioneer from Charlotte. They were auctioning everything. My father's desk, our family paintings, silver sets, the old grandfather clock I used to sneak behind to hide when I was scared. She didn't wait to go through probate with me. She just called it urgent liquidation. Even though Dad's will said I had joint rights to decisions about the estate, Lorraine's lawyer claimed the will was poorly worded and filed to have full control. I didn't have the money to fight her in court. So I stood there in the corner by the staircase watching people point and bid on pieces of my childhood like it was just some weekend antique market. Then it happened. They brought out one of the oil paintings my great-grandfather, a man I'd only seen in books and stories, but who my dad spoke about with pride. And while the auctioneer explained the history behind it, Lorraine leaned in toward a group of guests, her friends from her bridge club, her real estate agent, and her cousin who always made backhanded comments about my clothes. She laughed and said, not quietly at all, "Maybe next life she'll be born a leader." Everyone laughed. Some tried to hide it. Some didn't. My cousin Rick smirked. Aunt Valerie didn't even look at me. Nobody stood up for me. Not one damn person. I just stood there. I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. I remember gripping the wooden stair rail so hard my hand cramped. But I didn't say a single thing. That was the moment. That was when I decided I wasn't going to get loud. I was going to get even. For the next 20 years I said nothing. I lived like I'd moved on. But I didn't forget. I moved back to Charlotte after college. Took a job in a warehouse. Paid barely enough, but I learned. I paid attention to how shipments worked, how records were kept, how inventory could disappear without anyone asking questions. At night, I went to school. I got a degree in accounting, and then started doing side jobs for small businesses. Bookkeeping, helping them cut taxes, clean up messy files. Slowly, I learned the rules, the real rules. The ones people like Lorraine and Rick and Valerie used to protect their money. I learned about trusts, estate law, shell corporations, offshore holdings, and how to hide and find assets. By my early 30s, I had my own consulting business. Quiet. Small. But profitable. People trusted me. Rich people. The kind of people who made problems disappear with paperwork and signatures. And while I worked, I kept tabs on the family. I knew Lorraine sold the house 2 years after the auction. But she kept a lot of the family heirlooms. Claimed they were part of her dowry, or gifts from my father, which was a lie. I knew Rick had become obsessed with family history. He gave tours at historical societies, made TikToks about how his family helped build Hickory. Valerie opened a boutique selling authentic Southern heirlooms, most of which came from our estate. They were using the past like it belonged only to them. So I started my real work. The first thing I did was start buying things back. I traced the buyers from the original auction, which wasn't easy. Most used numbers instead of names. But some had used credit cards. Some sold the items on to other people. I followed the chain. One by one I found the paintings, sculptures, books, letters. Every time I found one, I made an offer through a holding company. Not under my name. Never under my name. Once I had control of it, I moved it to a storage facility I owned out near Boone. Temperature controlled. Secure. I cataloged everything. Then I started donating it anonymously. I worked with museums, mostly small ones. I made sure the donations were legally protected. No resales. No claiming them back. No history attached to our family. I paid extra to have them labeled donor unknown or artist unknown. I scrubbed every connection. No one could trace it back to the Tomley family. Not anymore. Then came the property. I found out the family estate had been transferred into an LLC that Lorraine controlled through a law firm in Greensboro. That LLC had changed hands twice after the sale. I bought the management company that oversaw it. Quietly. Through 3 layers of separation. Then I broke the LLC into parts and sold the land to a senior housing developer. The house was bulldozed. Not even a photo remains. I made sure the demolition permit included a privacy clause that blocked public photos. Every record of that property now leads to a new concrete building with a Walgreens across the street. Nothing looks like it did. Then I went after the story. Rick had uploaded family photos, scanned letters, even our great-grandfather's war records to ancestry sites. I filed copyright claims and had them taken down. I used bots to flood genealogy sites with fake trees. I submitted conflicting records to libraries under fake researcher names. I sent 2 letters to the local historical society asking for confirmation on the Tomley collapse. They had no idea what I meant. But now, when you search the Tomley name in most public records, the results are a mess. Mismatched. Contradictory. The story is broken. And when a story's broken, people stop telling it. Lorraine died in a low-end care facility last year. She had no money left. She'd borrowed against her remaining trust, and then defaulted on the loan. I was the one who bought that debt. I didn't cancel it. I didn't forgive it. But I made sure the care facility got enough money to keep her comfortable. No one else visited. Rick lost his antique store during the pandemic. He tried starting a podcast. It never took off. Valerie lives in a rented condo now. Her boutique is gone. Every single piece of their power came from a past they stole. I made sure that past was buried so deep no one would ever find it again. And I'm not done. I thought that would be enough. But people like them don't go down easy. Not without flailing, dragging others with them. It started with Rick. Somehow, somewhere, he figured out something was off. Maybe it was when the museum near Durham rejected his request to display the old family crest. He told them he was the last direct male heir of the Tomley line. They told him they had no records of that name tied to their collection. He posted about it online. Said the deep state was erasing Southern families. I laughed when I read that. But it got worse when he tried to publish a book. He'd written a manuscript about our family legacy, called it the Hickory Bloodline. Half of it was made-up stories about plantations and generational pride. The rest was cherry-picked facts, tied together with dramatized letters and photos. His publisher pulled out after a fact-checker flagged most of it as unverifiable. That's because I'd spent years making sure it would be. I got a message on my business email 2 weeks later. No name. No greeting. Just a sentence. I know it was you. You never were family. The IP traced back to a library in Lincolnton. I didn't respond. Then Valerie made her move. She filed a petition in Catawba County Court, demanding an investigation into unlawful seizure of family property. Claimed her boutique's heirlooms were taken through coercion and fraudulent acquisition. I hired a lawyer, one of the best. He walked into court with every document, every legal transfer, every public record proving I had nothing to do with their loss. At least, not in any way the court could punish. The judge threw it out. She stood up in the courtroom and yelled, "You're nothing, Tara. You were always nothing." She had tears in her eyes. Real ones. For a moment, it almost felt like victory didn't feel as good as I expected. Then I remembered how they all laughed. 3 months later, I started getting phone calls. Blocked numbers. Heavy breathing. Once someone just whispered, "Liar." They found my address. Someone left an envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a photo of the estate before it was demolished. My father standing in front of the big white columns. Me next to him, probably 7 or 8. And on the back, written in red marker, "You don't get to erase us." I installed cameras, changed locks, filed police reports. They couldn't prove anything. But that's when I realized they weren't going to let this go. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about identity. I hadn't just taken their money or their stuff, I'd taken their place in the story, in the world. And people like them, people who grew up thinking they were royalty in a town like Hickory, they couldn't survive without that story. So they came for me in the only way they had left. They started showing up in my life. It started with Lorraine's niece, Annie. She showed up at one of my client events in Charlotte, smiling like we were old friends. I hadn't seen her in 20 years. She was working for a real estate firm now. She handed me a drink, leaned in close and said, "I heard you're doing well. Your father would be proud if he knew what you really were." Then she left. Just like that. No scene. Just a warning. Next week, 2 of my clients pulled out of long-term contracts. One of them mentioned concerning rumors about my background. I hired a private investigator. Took him less than a week to trace a handful of anonymous emails to Rick. He was sending concerned citizen tips to people I did business with, claiming I had lied about my identity, said I was a fraud, claimed I had stolen property. He wasn't trying to sue me. He was trying to discredit me, destroy me the way I'd destroyed them. It almost worked. But here's the thing, I had records, truth, paper trails, and now I had nothing left to lose. So I decided it was time to stop working from the shadows. I contacted a local reporter I used to know, someone I trusted. I gave her a controlled leak, told her I had documents, legal transfers, trust fund schemes, dirty tax work from the old Tomley estate. She was hesitant at first, but the stuff I had? It was gold. We didn't name Rick, or Valerie, or Annie directly. We didn't have to. We told the story of a wealthy Southern family who lost everything because of corruption, neglect, and greed. It hit every paper in the state. Online too. The title was brutal. The family that buried its own history. The article didn't mention me once. But everyone knew. I made them feel invisible. Now they were going to live that way. After the article hit, everything got quiet. Too quiet. No more emails. No more phone calls. My clients stopped asking questions. The smear campaign against me faded like smoke. It was almost like they'd finally given up. But I knew better. Silence wasn't surrender. It was set up. 2 months passed. Then I got a letter, real paper, no return address, no postmark. Just slipped through the slit in my door in the middle of the night. Inside was a single sheet. "We're not done. You're not the only one with secrets." And taped to the bottom was a birth certificate. Not mine. It belonged to my father. Except the name of his mother wasn't who I thought it was. Not the woman I'd grown up believing was my grandmother. This name was different, Spanish sounding. Rosa L. Navarro. Born in New Mexico. It didn't make sense. My dad had always said our family had been in North Carolina for generations. That we came from old stock. That we were builders, landowners, part of the town's early days. But this paper said otherwise. It shook me. I took it to a records office. Then I dug deeper. Online archive. Private records. DNA services I never thought I'd need. Turns out my father had rewritten his own history. He was born in Las Cruces, New Mexico. His mother, Rosa Navarro, was a housekeeper. No record of a Tomley name anywhere. His father was listed as unknown. He didn't come from legacy. He built one out of lies. The Hickory bloodline Rick worshipped? Fake. The old plantation stories Valerie used to lure boutique clients? Fiction. The war medals? Bought at auction. It hit me like a truck. My revenge had been so focused on tearing down their fake legacy. I hadn't realized my dad had created it from nothing. And now I was left standing in the ashes of a lie, holding the truth in my hands. Then came the final twist. The woman who raised me, my mother, died when I was 6. I always believed she was my real mom. But when I ran my DNA against online databases, another hit popped up. A close match. Too close. I tracked the person down. Her name was Melanie Navarro. She lived in Santa Fe. Age 57. I messaged her. Told her I had questions about her family. She was cautious but agreed to talk. We video called. And the moment she saw me, she froze. She reached off camera, pulled out a framed picture. It was my father. Younger, smiling. His arm around a woman who looked like me. Not Melanie. The other woman. Melanie said. That was my sister. Rosa's daughter. Her name was Celeste. She died in a fire when she was 24. She was pregnant. We never knew what happened to the baby. My hands were shaking. Your dad left town after the funeral, she said. We never heard from him again. That was the same year my mother, the woman I thought was my mother, showed up in Hickory with a newborn. Me. So here it is. I spent 20 years tearing down a legacy that was built on lies. I exposed the fakes, burned the myths, took away their history, but in doing that, I uncovered my own. I wasn't the heir to the Tomley estate. I wasn't born into Southern royalty. I was the daughter of a grieving, vanished woman who died before I ever took my first breath. My father stole me from her family and built a fantasy life. Lorraine helped keep the lie going. So did the rest of them. That's why they hated me. That's why they never let me belong. They always knew I didn't come from them, but they didn't expect me to find out. And now that I have, I'm not just the woman who erased a family's legacy. I'm the living proof it never belonged to them to begin with. After I spoke to Melanie, I didn't sleep for 2 nights. I had chased revenge for 20 years, thinking I was setting the record straight. I thought I was restoring justice. But now, I knew I was never part of that family to begin with. Not really. I was the stolen child of a woman whose name had been erased. And I'd spent my whole life trying to prove I belonged to a bloodline that never accepted me. Because they knew the truth. Lorraine knew. So did Valerie. And Rick. They knew I wasn't Robert Tomley's daughter by blood. I was the child he brought back from New Mexico under a fake name, claiming I was his and his new wife's. Lorraine played the part of stepmother, but she was never supposed to raise me. I was just there to protect the lie. And when my father died, they saw me as a threat. An inconvenient truth. That's why they rushed the estate auction. That's why they laughed at me. That's why Lorraine said, maybe next life she'll be born a leader. It wasn't just cruel. It was a message. They thought I'd never be more than a mistake. But they were wrong. I flew to Santa Fe and met Melanie in person. She cried when she saw me. We hugged for a long time. She showed me photos of Celeste, my real mother. I saw the same jawline. Same eyes. Same stubborn expression. Then she gave me a box. Inside were letters Celeste had written. One was unfinished. It talked about meeting a man named Robert, how he was different, how she was scared but hopeful. The last page was ripped, the ink smeared like tears. I took it home with me. And then I knew what I had to do. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted justice. Real justice. So I contacted a lawyer. A different one, someone outside of North Carolina. I gave him everything. Birth certificate, DNA results, the history of how I was raised under a stolen identity. He helped me build a case. We filed for a formal investigation into Robert Tomley's estate history, with an emphasis on wrongful adoption and identity fraud. It shook the legal community in Catawba County. Old cases were reopened. Lorraine's trust came under fire. The family had claimed tax benefits for me over the years. Now those filings were fraudulent. The IRS got involved. Rick tried to go on YouTube to defend his legacy, but the video was flooded with comments calling him a liar, a fraud, a clown clinging to fake glory. Valerie was hit hardest. Turns out she'd been using fake provenance claims for over half her boutique inventory. A local news station did a segment on her called Heirloom Hustler. She lost everything. Then the banks came knocking. Because of the reopened estate case, all assets tied to the original Tomley estate were frozen pending investigation. That included their private accounts, properties, and trusts. Rick's condo. Seized. Valerie's car. Repossessed. Everything they clung to like it made them better than everyone else gone. One by one they folded. Rick tried to sue me for emotional damage. The judge laughed him out of court. Valerie filed for bankruptcy. She claimed it was unfair, that I stole her future. I sent her a framed copy of the article that started it all, the family that buried its own history. She never replied. And Lorraine? She died before the court case finished. Alone. No visitors.
No obituary.
Not even a headstone. Her nursing facility held her ashes for 6 months before they were tossed into a crematorium vault. I could have stopped it. Paid for something simple. But I didn't. She erased my mother. She deserved the same. As for me, I changed my name. I took back my mother's last name, Navarro. I legally gave up any claim to the Tomley family or their fake estate. Let the records show the bloodline ends with them. I opened a community scholarship fund in Celeste Navarro's name for young women in New Mexico who aged out of foster care. It's quiet, private, just like she was. Sometimes people ask me why I never speak publicly about the case. I tell them this. I wasn't born to lead them. I was born to end them. And I did. Not with fire. Not with fists. But with facts, time, and truth. Now when you search the Tomley name, you find a broken story. Dead ends. A warning. And when you search mine, you find a beginning.